My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I ruined my marriage and learned a hard lesson about loyalty and love. It all began 3 years ago. My husband Mark and I had been married for 5 years, living in a beautiful house in the suburbs. At first, our marriage was perfect. Mark was attentive, loving, and always there for me. But over time, things started to change. Mark got a promotion at work, which meant more responsibilities and endless hours at the office. Gradually, I began to feel lonely and abandoned. Romantic dinners turned into cold dishes in the microwave, and intimate conversations were replaced by brief text messages. One summer afternoon, while I was home alone, the doorbell rang. It was my Uncle Jack, my father's younger brother. I hadn't seen him in years, and his visit was a pleasant surprise. Jack had always been the fun uncle, the life of family parties. "Sarah, it's been so long," he exclaimed with a radiant smile. "I was in the neighbourhood and remembered your father telling me you had moved here. I hope I'm not bothering you." I invited him in, happy to have company. Jack explained that he had come to pick up a book my father had lent him. As I looked for the book, we started chatting and catching up. The conversation flowed naturally. Jack told me about his work as a literature professor at the local university, and I told him about my career as a freelance graphic designer. Time flew by, and before we knew it, hours had passed. "I should go," Jack said, looking at his watch. "It's been a pleasure seeing you, Sarah. We should do this more often." I nodded, feeling a twinge of sadness as I watched him leave. "Of course, Uncle Jack. You're welcome any time." From that day on, Jack began to visit me regularly. At first, they were brief visits with the excuse of returning the book or asking about the family. But over time, our encounters became longer and more frequent. I discovered in Jack a confidant, someone I could talk to about everything. He listened attentively when I told him about my loneliness, my frustrations with Mark's work, my unfulfilled dreams. He shared with me his passion for literature, recommending books and discussing our favourite authors. One afternoon, while sharing a bottle of wine on the back porch, I felt something different in the air. Jack was looking at me in a way I had never noticed before. His eyes shone with an intensity that made me shiver. "Sarah," he said softly, "I can't stop thinking about you." My heart raced. I knew it was wrong, that he was my uncle, that I was married. But at that moment, all those thoughts vanished. There were only Jack and me, and the electricity crackling between us. Without thinking, I leaned towards him and kissed him. It was a passionate kiss, full of repressed desire and confused emotions. When we separated, we were both breathless. "This is wrong," I whispered, but I couldn't help kissing him again. And so began our clandestine romance. We met in secret, taking advantage of Mark's long work days. Each encounter was a mix of unbridled passion and corrosive guilt. Jack made me feel alive again. He listened to me, valued me, desired me. With him, I felt beautiful and wanted again. But the price of that happiness was high. Every time Mark came home, I was consumed by guilt. Every kiss, every caress from my husband felt like a betrayal to Jack. There were moments when we were almost discovered. One afternoon, Mark came home early just as Jack and I were on the couch. We barely had time to separate and pretend we were having a casual conversation. My heart was beating so hard, I feared Mark could hear it. "What's he doing here?" Mark asked, with a mixture of surprise and suspicion in his voice. "He just stopped by to say hello," I replied with feigned calm. "We haven't seen each other in a while." Mark seemed to accept the explanation, but I noticed he was looking at us warily. After that day, he became more attentive, coming home earlier and asking questions about how I spent my days. The tension at home increased day by day. Mark suspected something was wrong. I could see it in his eyes, in the way he watched me when he thought I wasn't noticing. I felt increasingly trapped between my love for Mark and my passion for Jack. One night, as we were dining in silence, Mark dropped his fork with a dull thud. "Sarah, is there something you want to tell me?" he asked in a tense voice. I felt the ground opening beneath my feet. "What do you mean?" I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "You've been distant lately. You spend a lot of time with your Uncle Jack. Is something going on that I should know about?" I denied vehemently, making up excuses about work projects and family meetings. Mark seemed to accept it, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. That night, as he slept, I cried silently, torn apart by guilt and fear. Despite the growing danger, I couldn't stay away from Jack. Our encounters became riskier, more desperate. We met in hotels, at his apartment, even in my own house when Mark was on business trips. One afternoon, we made the fatal mistake. Mark had called to say he would be late, so I invited Jack over. We were in the bedroom, lost in our passion, when we heard the front door open. Panic overwhelmed us. Jack barely had time to hide in the closet before Mark entered the room. He found me in bed, pretending to sleep, with my heart beating so hard I feared it would give me away. "Sarah?" Mark called softly. "Are you awake?" I pretended to wake up slowly, praying he wouldn't notice my nervousness. "Mark, I thought you'd be late." "The meeting ended early," he replied, looking around the room suspiciously. "Are you alone?" "Of course," I lied, feeling each word burn my throat. "Why wouldn't I be?" Mark nodded slowly, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. He approached the closet and, for a terrible moment, I thought he would open it. But instead, he headed to the bathroom. I took advantage of those precious seconds to get Jack out of the closet and push him towards the back door. I'll never forget the look of fear and guilt in his eyes as he disappeared into the night. The following days were a hell of nerves and paranoia. Mark became more distant, colder. I felt his eyes following me constantly, looking for evidence of my betrayal. Finally, a week later, everything exploded. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Mark came in, with an expression I had never seen on his face before. "Do you want to explain this?" he said, throwing a pile of photos on the table. With horror, I saw images of Jack and me kissing, hugging, entering and leaving hotels. Someone had been following us, documenting every moment of our betrayal. "Mark, I began, but the words got stuck in my throat. "How could you?" he shouted, his voice broken by anger and pain. "With your own uncle, in our house." Tears were running down my face as I tried to explain, to apologize, but I knew there was no excuse for what I had done. Mark packed his things that same night and left. The last thing I saw was his back as he walked out the door, taking with him the pieces of our broken marriage. In the days that followed, I tried to contact Jack, seeking comfort in the only place I thought I could find it. But he had also distanced himself, consumed by guilt and fear of the consequences. I was left alone, surrounded by the rubble of my life. I lost my husband, my lover, and the respect of my family when the truth came to light. The looks of disgust and disappointment from my parents and siblings were almost as painful as Mark's departure. The months passed slowly. I tried to rebuild my life, but the weight of my actions crushed me. Every night, I was tormented by memories of what I had lost, of what I had destroyed with my own hands. One day, almost a year after the discovery, I received a letter from Mark. With trembling hands, I opened it. "Sarah, I've spent a lot of time trying to understand why all this happened. The anger and pain have given way to a sad acceptance. I can't forgive you, at least not now. But I hope that someday we can both find peace. Mark." Those words were like a dagger in my heart, but they also gave me a ray of hope. Not of reconciliation, I knew that was impossible, but of redemption. I began to work on myself. I went to therapy, faced my demons and the reasons behind my actions. I learned about the importance of communication in a relationship, about fidelity and respect. Today, 3 years after that fateful day, I look back and barely recognize the woman I was. The experience has changed me profoundly. I've learned painful lessons about love, loyalty, and the consequences of our actions. Sometimes in the quietness of the night, I still feel the weight of guilt. I think about Mark and the life we could have had. I think about Jack and the passion we shared, a passion that I now see was doomed from the start. I can't change the past, but I can learn from it. Every day is an opportunity to be a better person, to value honesty and integrity above selfish desires. If I could talk to my past self, I would tell her that loneliness and dissatisfaction are not excuses to betray those who love us. I would tell her that true love requires work, communication, and commitment. I would tell her that the excitement of the forbidden is never worth the price paid in the end. Today, I'm single. I haven't seen Jack since that day, and I know it's better that way. Mark has moved to another city, and I've heard he's rebuilding his life. I'm happy for him, although that happiness comes with a twinge of pain for what we lost. My relationship with my family has been slowly rebuilding. It has been a painful process, full of difficult conversations and awkward moments. But little by little, we are healing. I look to the future with a mixture of hope and caution. I don't know if I'll ever fall in love again, or if someone will be able to trust me enough to share their life with me. But I know that, whatever happens, I will never forget the lessons I learned from this experience. Betrayal leaves scars that never completely disappear. Every day, when I look in the mirror, I see those invisible scars. They are a constant reminder of the damage I caused and the price I paid for my actions. But they are also a testimony to my growth, to my ability to face my mistakes and learn from them. They are proof that even after falling so low, it is possible to get up and move forward. Sometimes, in my weakest moments, I wonder what would have happened if things had been different. If I had talked to Mark about my loneliness instead of seeking comfort in someone else's arms. If I had resisted temptation when Jack confessed his feelings. If we had been more careful and never been discovered. But I know those thoughts are dangerous. I can't change the past, and fantasizing about what could have been only prevents me from moving forward. Instead, I try to focus on the present and the future. Each day is an opportunity to be better, to make wiser decisions, to value honesty and integrity above all else. I've learned that love is not just a feeling, but a choice we make every day. A choice to be faithful, to communicate, to work on our problems, instead of looking for escapes. I've also learned the importance of loving oneself. For a long time, I sought validation and love in others because I didn't feel complete on my own. Now I know that I must be at peace with myself before I can have a healthy relationship with someone else. Despite all the pain and regret, there's a part of me that can't help but feel gratitude for this experience. Not because I justify it or believe it was right, but because it has made me grow in a way I never would have imagined. Today, I am stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. I better understand the complexity of human emotions and the consequences of our actions. I've learned to forgive, not only others but also myself. And although the scars will remain forever, I no longer see them as a mark of shame, but as a reminder of how far I've come and how much I've learned. Sometimes, when I walk the streets of our city, I wonder if I'll run into Mark or Jack. What would I say if I saw them? What would they say? I'll probably never know, and maybe it's better that way. Some chapters of our lives must remain closed so we can write new ones. I've started to rediscover my passion for graphic design. My work has become a form of therapy, a way to express emotions that I can't put into words. Each project is a new beginning, an opportunity to create something beautiful from a blank canvas. Somehow, I feel like I'm doing the same with my life. Recently, I dared to go on a date. It was something simple, a coffee with a man I met at a networking event. Throughout the evening, I felt the urge to tell him everything about my past, to warn him about the damage I could cause. But I held back. I learned that I don't need to wear my story like a label, that I deserve the chance to be known without the weight of my past mistakes. The date was pleasant, but it didn't go beyond that. However, it was an important step for me. It showed me that I can still connect with other people, that I'm not doomed to loneliness because of my past actions. As time passes, the memories of those passionate days with Jack fade. I no longer feel the same excitement when I think about our furtive encounters. Instead, I feel a mixture of sadness and shame. But I also feel gratitude for the lesson I learned, as painful as it was. My parents have been an unexpected source of support throughout this process. Although at first they were devastated and disappointed, over time they have come to understand that we all make mistakes. Their unconditional love has been a beacon in my darkest moments. A few weeks ago, my mother told me something that has stuck in my mind. "Sarah, sometimes we have to break to be able to rebuild ourselves stronger." Her words resonated deeply with me. I realized that was exactly what had happened. I had broken into 1,000 pieces, but little by little I was rebuilding myself. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be able to forgive myself completely. Guilt still appears in the most unexpected moments, like a shadow that refuses to disappear. But each day is a little easier. Each day I feel a little more at peace with myself. I've started writing a journal, a practice my therapist recommended. In its pages, I pour out all my thoughts, my fears, my hopes. It's a way to process my emotions and see how much I've progressed. Sometimes when I read old entries, I barely recognize the woman who wrote those words. I've changed so much. One of the hardest lessons I've learned is that I can't control the actions or feelings of others. I can't force Mark to forgive me, nor can I erase the pain I caused my family. The only thing I can control are my own actions and how I choose to live my life from now on. I've started doing volunteer work at a local women's shelter. Helping other people who are going through difficult times has given me a new perspective on my own problems. It has taught me that we all have complicated stories, that we all make mistakes, but that we also all have the capacity to grow and change. Sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, I close my eyes and imagine what my life would be like if none of this had ever happened. If I were still married to Mark, living the life I once dreamed of. But then I open my eyes and look around at the life I've built for myself. It's not perfect. It's full of scars and painful memories. But it's mine. And I'm learning to love it. Recently, I received an invitation to my cousin's wedding. For a moment, I hesitated to attend. I knew the whole family would be there, including Jack. But I decided to go. I realized that I couldn't keep avoiding uncomfortable situations for the rest of my life. I had to face my past head-on. The day of the wedding arrived and, as expected, it was difficult. The sidelong glances, the whispers behind my back, the tension when Jack and I found ourselves in the same room. But I survived. More than that, I felt proud of myself for having the courage to be there. That night, as I watched the newlyweds dance their first dance as husband and wife, I felt a mix of emotions. Joy for their happiness, a touch of envy for what I had lost, but above all, hope. Hope that someday I too could find that kind of love again. A love based on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. As I drove back home that night, I reflected on everything that had happened in the last few years. The passion, the betrayal, the pain, the guilt, the growth. I realized that despite everything, I wouldn't change anything. Every experience, as painful as it was, had led me to where I am now. I don't know what the future holds for me. I don't know if I'll ever get married again, if I'll have children, if I'll achieve the successful career I've always dreamed of. What I do know is that I'll face each day with honesty and courage, that I'll value the relationships in my life and never again take for granted the love and trust of others. My story is not a fairy tale. It doesn't have a perfect happy ending. But it's real, it's raw, and it's mine. And I hope that somehow it can serve as a warning and a lesson for others. Love is precious and fragile. Trust, once broken, is difficult to repair. But there's always hope, always a chance for redemption if we're willing to do the hard work of changing and growing. As I write these last lines, I look out the window and see the sun setting on the horizon. It's a new day ending, and tomorrow will be another beginning, and I'm ready for it, with all its possibilities and challenges. Because now I know that, no matter what happens, I have the strength to face it. This is my story, a story of love, betrayal, loss, and redemption. It's not perfect, but it's authentic. And I hope that somehow it can resonate with those who read it. Because in the end, we're all human, imperfect and complex, trying to navigate the turbulent waters of love and life as best we can. And so, with a heart lighter than it has been in years, I close this chapter of my life. Not with a fairy tale happy ending, but with something much more valuable: understanding, growth, and the promise of a new beginning.